Hey everyone, this is Mr. Airsoft. In today's video, we'll be looking at my brother's upgraded Demolition Ranch UDR-15. This gun's got a bit of a story behind it, so let's get into it. Alright, so just to start off, I'm not going to be disassembling this gun in this video because I just got it back together today and had it all tested out. It's good to go, so I really don't feel like going back into it. So I'm just going to describe everything the best that I can. Start off, to give some backstory for this gun though, the actual base build behind it was in my brother's Spectre PDW type gun I had a video on earlier on my channel a while ago. It was a high-speed build, just a single sector build, nothing fancy or anything, but it was 12-to-1 gears, SHS, 16 TPA motor. I'm not really honestly sure what the spring rating is for this point. It's been a while since I originally put it together. I just got a gate MERF 3.2 MOSFET. So those are the main factors of that build. So that gun was together for probably about a season, and then my brother got tired of using that little gun as his main gun, so he wanted me to switch it over to his kind of his throwaway gun, you know, where he was okay with modding and stuff. It was his King Arms CAA M4 gun that I made a video on earlier in the channel. So I kind of transferred all the gearbox and parts. Well, I should say not the gearbox itself, just the parts out of it, because it was a V3 in the Spectre. I transferred all the parts to the King Arms gun, and that worked well for a few years. He had some issues. I didn't take into account that the motor was actually loose in the pistol grip, and when you shot it, you could actually feel the pistol grip vibrating, and I didn't realize anything was wrong at that point until I ended up stripping the bevel gear out from the pinion gear from the motor. Stripped the bevel gear out, so I had to get a new one of those, and then from then on I just kind of shimmed the motor inside the pistol grip, just wrapped it with some tape, not too much because I didn't want to overheat the motor, but just put some on the side so it stayed sturdy inside the pistol grip, but just enough so that it was still able to maintain its adjustment regarding the motor height inside the pistol grip. So that was good, worked well for a long time. And then I want to say, yeah, it was last year we were at a bigger event, and later of the day in that event, his gun stopped working. It made a loud whirring noise. He stopped shooting. He told me about it, and I took it apart later, and I found that the piston, because it just had one of those high-speed SHS pistons in it, and it just ripped the rail right off the piston, which I've seen in the past people say, and I agree with this as well. You'd rather have that be the failure point in your gun than, say, your gears or something. So having a plastic piston there with the metal rack was really helpful for that, because it just allowed that to fail instead of anything else. So needless to say, his gun was out of commission for the rest of the day. And then the season was pretty much over after that, so we kind of just forgot about it. But he wanted to have this gun. He wanted me to switch these parts over to this gun. So essentially, I just told him, okay, get a new piston, I'll do the rest. So ended up getting a new piston for it. It was just the same exact one as before. I was able to just keep the original. I was able to use the King Arms gearbox, and that's this gearbox. Before anybody mentions it's not tough enough for any of this, it's perfectly fine. It's got the radiusing on the shell up here at the head, so it's not going to crack there. It's been used for a few years in this with these parts, so it's obviously not like it's not strong enough, so I wouldn't worry about that. I just was able to re-shim all the gears with this new pistol grip, because I had a different pistol grip obviously with the other gun. So this one I just took out some material so it wasn't providing a false positive regarding the shimming when it was pressed up against here, as opposed to when it was just screwed onto the box itself. I did kind of go a little bit overboard unfortunately here, but he's not worried about it. It's not a big deal. So yeah, that went well. I did run into some issues with the selector here. It had a different style selector because this is a pretty fancy EMG gun, so they had like a dual selector system with all these little gears and everything to move that. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna get rid of this. This isn't very practical. The only unfortunate part was they had a different style selector, so this has just a screw that goes into this piece. There's an internal cam lobe that has a screw that goes from the inside of there and screws into the selector switch itself. But the EMG style was pretty much the opposite, where it was a screw that went through the outside selector and then screwed into a gear with a lobe on it. But the gear was a different, the lobe of the EMG parts was a different size than most standard ones. So I just had to get rid of that selector entirely and swap this from the King Arms onto this. I had to grind down a lip that they had on this body. Fortunately, I ended up scuffing here and here a little bit, but once again, I don't think he'll be too worried about it. The only other main issue I ran into converting the regular style gearbox over to this gun was, it's been so long. This gun's been taken apart for a long time, to be honest with you, but the spring guide, I'm not sure what EMG, boy, this is actually the OEM for this, the Hakatsu, or however you pronounce their name, I can't remember. APS, there you go. I can't remember how they had it set up for their spring guide in here. But actually, this is the APS part inside this King Arm gearbox. So that's a whole nother story, but I had to take my angle grinder, grind down two of the, because it's a quick change spring guide, I had to grind down two of the lobes. I had 4 lobes for the quick change. I had to grind down 2 of them and grind down just the outer material of the base of the spring guide itself because it was too large to fit into the King Arms hole. So I just had to grind down a little bit. It was able to fit in there. But I can't remember how they had the whole spring guide bolt set up to hold it in here so it was straight. So I took a really, really long bolt like what they use for the full stocks that runs all the way through the buffer tube. It's actually, I drilled a hole in the back of this stock and just ran it all the way through there. And I had to, this stock has to sit on a certain setting so that the bolt just runs all the way through to the spring guide and holds it down tight. So I think my brother will be okay with that as well. Once again, it's not an entirely looks gun, it's a performance gun. Even though it looks great, it's still a performance gun. So this is all for performance. He's got this, one of these special adjustable triggers. This, you can't really adjust it too much because it's now the optical MOSFET, so you're limited to how you can adjust it, given that it's just a fixed trigger contact system. But I did what I could. This switch doesn't click as well as it should. It's not really a ball. It's not really a ball and spring. It's got a different kind of spring, and I don't even know what you call it set up, but it still stops in the right spots. So all in all, it turned out pretty well though. I can't remember what the actual specs for the RPS was. It could have gone down a bit too, just with the motor being used over time. I'm not quite sure on how much it goes down by over time with that, but it should be shooting around 35 rounds per second. FPS, I had it shooting today, was really consistent around 365 FPS, so that is pretty much perfect. So, and this is, once again, it's an outdoor gun. We don't go to any indoor fields. So in a second, I will hook up a battery and just have it shooting, just demonstrate that to you guys. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. He'll have to do some finishing touches to it regarding the wiring. I was unable to run it through the buffer tube got in the way of the gearbox, so it's gonna have to run externally like this. I might get some just electrical conduit and put it on the outside of the harness, and then he might have to get some kind of pouch or some kind of way of just attaching it to the outside of the stock. That's how I do it with my upgraded guns. I don't have a problem with that. I did that with my friend's AK. He doesn't have a problem with it. But anyways, I'll stop rambling. I'll get a battery hook up to this thing in a second. Alright, so I've got my big beefy 11-1 LiPo hooked up to it. I'll just do a real quick demonstration here. So it's a semi, obviously. Full auto. So yeah, I think it sounds pretty good. I told my brother when I originally transferred all these parts to his M4, his previous M4, I told him this is probably one of the coolest and best sounding guns I've done so far. The shimming just always turns out so well. I don't know if it's just this specific gear set, this motor, or this gearbox shell or what, but it just always sounds good. It also, I should mention, I'm not even running bearings in this setup. It's just got the King Arms bushings that were in the gearbox. Never wore out so far. It runs pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with it. I hope he is. I think he will be. But other than that, that's pretty much it for me on this gun. I will say for my channel in general, I haven't done too much airsoft stuff lately. I'm kind of stepped away from that. I still play occasionally. I don't play as often as I used to, but I still maintain my guns, obviously. I just haven't really gotten into getting new ones to upgrade them or anything like that. I do enjoy it still. I have so many other hobbies at this point, and I'm working a full-time job now as a mechanic, so it is what it is. I'll try to still do videos occasionally when I can, but it just won't be as active as I used to. But thanks to all the subscribers. I still see people are still viewing my videos and subscribing, so I really appreciate that. But other than that, thanks for watching.